Welcome, colleagues, to the NPQH Submitting a Successful Application. My name's Tim McShane. I'm the lead online facilitator for Best Practice Network, and I work with all the licenses represented here this evening. And the person here that's going to take you through that application form is Yvonne Gandy. Over to you, Yvonne.
Can you guess who the good-looking one is amongst those 5 colleagues there? Welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking time this evening. And just to confirm, there'll be 2 parts to this session. The first part is about the licensee and who we are and what we stand for, because I think it's really important that when you do put your application in, that it's really clear who you're going to be working with, and you make that decision of, yeah, that's the right group that we do want to work with. Particularly as this new intake for September, your application will go direct to the licensee of your choice. And that's a big shift. So go to the licensee of your choice, and the licensee will then send your applications to an external assessment group. So it's really important you get to know who we are and what we're about. He's moved the pictures, but can you just put it back, please, Tim? Just the pictures that you got in front earlier. The 3 very important colleagues are Hamish, Chris and Beth. They're fantastic colleagues. They're there to make sure that all the programs, all the NPQH modules run smoothly, and they're the operational end of the licensee work. Obviously, my role, Tim's already said, I'm the lead facilitator across the licensees for NPQH, and Tim does all the online, hence he's supporting me this evening. Just then, in terms of the outcomes again, Tim, if you just move to the next slide, please. It looks as if there's about 5 parts there, but basically there's 2 parts for today. 1, get to know who we are, what we stand for. 2, I will give you an insight into the application pro forma, and do hope that you've got available a copy of the competency headlines, a copy of the application form, and just in case, you'll notice in the control panel that there's some handouts there for you if you want to click on them, if you haven't got ready access to the ones that we sent a link through to you before today. And can you have a sort of a pen and a bit of paper available as well, please? I can see everybody now clamoring for pens and paper.
All going off. Just to say, if you click those links on the where it says handouts, that you'll download those particular documents. It's fairly straightforward there.
Now, because there's so many, and we've run this last Thursday as well, because so many have been attending these, I can't promise in an hour that we will answer every single question, because at the end of the day, you do want an insight into the application paperwork. But what Tim said is we will make sure that either a personal answer comes back to you, because we'll know who's asked the question, and or we'll put out some of the frequently asked questions across the 2 briefing events. Can you just move on to the next slide, please? Just so that you know sort of who we are and sort of what we do then. Best Practice Network are a national organisation, and they oversee 3 licensees across the country. We are rated as, from HMI and National College, as a gold provider. We have had a significant number of colleagues go through the programme in the last 4 years now, and all I can say to you, colleagues, is that if you apply and come and join one of our licensees, then we will make sure that the personalisation and the support will do 2 things. 1, it will support you in your career development and getting a headship, and 2, we will support you in getting your NPQH at the end. Just move on, please, Tim. These are the 3 licensees that we work sort of with, and you'll notice one's in the Northwest, one's in the East Midlands, and one's in the South. So you've got the Outstanding Leaders Partnership here up in the Northwest, because I'm based in Cheshire. You've got LEAD, the Urban Teaching School Alliance, in the East Midlands, and then you've got the Outstanding Leaders Alliance in East England and South West. Now, depending on numbers applying and being successful through the assessment process, we will tailor the geography accordingly. So just for argument's sake, if we get, Jerry, it's a bit more difficult for Paris, but if we get 12 that want to Paris, we'll even come to Paris and run a programme. But we have had a number of colleagues from outside of GB, and colleagues usually come across for the face-to-face events from Germany, Paris, Belgium we've had someone from, so it's doable, and that's something, Jerry, when you make your application is successful, that's something that will support you with. But there's 3 licensees, and we're able to geographically match, depending on how many successful applications we receive, we'll look to where we group the central venues for the face-to-face events. Obviously for online that isn't as big an issue, because the online we do cross regions anyway, to make sure that people in Cheshire are able to talk and check in with people from down south. Next slide, please. These two slides really just sum up what we're about, and I'm not going to read them to you, other than to say that in terms of what we're trying to achieve, this really is given an indicator on this forms a foundation on which we build our partnership. And the partnerships you've seen from the 3 licensees, we have a significant number of placement schools that work with us, and we have a significant number of head teachers that work with us to make sure that the programme is the best it can be. And that collaborative partnership, ensuring that the quality of your leadership, that you feel that when you come in you're leaders, but when you come out even better leaders and you get the qualification, that the key personnel and the key partners working with us will work towards that sort of form of foundation. And we are working so hard with the heads. I think there's 75% in total of head teachers working in the delivery of the programme. They're helping lead the leadership profession and obviously the programmes. Next slide, please, Tim. In terms of then sort of what we stand for and how we evaluate ourselves, if as the lead facilitator for NPQH, these things don't happen, then in a sense I failed you. So, we will give you personalisation and choice, with structure though, because we found in the last 4 years it's imperative there is structure to the programme, so we know what our work pattern, what the expectation is on us across the year. There is flexibility embedded in the process, and there will be ongoing evaluation and review. So in terms of the quality and the standards that we measure ourselves by, these 7 characteristics are critical to the way that we work. And it's something, if you wanted to come back and say, actually, Yvonne, have you thought about, do you really think you've been adaptable? Then, you need to challenge the organisation that's the best practice network if we're not getting these characteristics right on your behalf. Next slide, please, Tim. I'm not going to go through these, but we could give you loads and loads and loads of feedback on colleagues' comments on us. And, there's a trainee one in the slides you'll see when you get them tomorrow. If you move on, please, Tim. There's a comment here from HMI saying how wonderful we are. I think that the test is that in the last 4 years, the evaluations, the impact of the programme and the process that we use to support you, once you've got through gateway assessment, is of a very, very high standard. And I'm really proud to be part of that organisation. Also proud to be working with colleagues like yourselves, because you're coming in as leaders. We're taking you through a development process. For that development process, when you get through final assessment, you are even better leaders, and a significant number of colleagues do get headship during the time they're working with us, and we do support you personally if you need some support with preparing for interviews, as well as obviously the nature of the job is getting the NPQH at the end, and we have got 100% outcomes on that as well. Next slide, please, Tim. So this is what it looks like. So basically, your journey will include, you'll have an induction event, so at least you'll know what on earth is going on, what have I let myself in for, what's this all about, how do I choose my piece of work that's going to be assessed at the end. So that induction event is really critical, just to get you into the NPQH way of thinking, if you like, and being able to plan your time accordingly in a very hectic school and academy lifestyle. You will have to undertake 3 essential modules, and those modules could be for hours, but we've designed, and it's unique to our licensees, we've designed a course linked to each of those essential modules that you have your own facilitator who will take you through that course to make sure that you undertake the module as best as you can, and as in explicit a way as you can. You also have to do 2 elective modules, and again those elective modules are online, and you can choose those elective modules from a menu of 8 other modules, so you choose your 2 from the 8, and again we'd support you in this much that you'll choose those modules a bit later on when you're clearer about the essential modules and where you're at in school, and you know, we have got home lives as well, haven't we? You do have to do 9 days placement in a school or an academy, and we do have a significant number of placement schools around the country. You will need to submit a school improvement piece of work that you've done in your own school, and a piece of work, a shorter piece of work in your placement school. Now your placement 9 days will be 5 days linked to your piece of work, with 4 days shadowing of the good outstanding head that you'll be working in their school. Right the way throughout this sort of characteristic of supporting you, you know, there will be coaching and online tutorials just to make sure everything's okay and everything's working for you. And towards the end of 12 months, we'll run an event that's very well received, that I have 1 head to every 4 participants, and that event takes you through 4 activities, 2 of which help you with final assessment, and 2 of which will help you as part of interview process and interview practice, ready for getting your headship. For those colleagues who are already heads, because we do get a number of colleagues who are already head teachers, the processes and practices will support your development as well. Just so in sort of a visual format, it looks a bit like this, which is the next slide, please, Tim. We call this the blob. I don't know why, but you can probably tell by the different colours all over it. If I just pick, so you can see there to the top left-hand side with the online web conference, you will have a briefing just online, just early September. That's followed by your induction mid-September. We'll put dates to these when nearer July, when we'll know how many have come through Gateway and where we're going to be running each of the groups across the country. And then we're in a sort of a model, which unfortunately this diagram's slightly out of sync, but basically we'll start with the online short course, which is the green blob. I'll come to the diagnostic in a minute, Tim. So we start with the online. The online takes you through the sort of educational rigour and development needed in terms of the essential module, which is SAH stands for Succeeding in Headship. There's a follow-up face-to-face event, which is practically based and supported by head teachers. And you then have a follow-up online tutorial with a tutor that you'll be assigned to, just to check in with you to make sure everything's fine, everything's going okay. And then that follows through for your second essential module, you do the online green, followed by red, followed by blue. And for this third essential module, the green, followed by red, followed by the blue, the coaching. Now, all of that is underpinned by you completing a diagnostic at the start of the program, and that's about me and me being a leader. And at the end of the program, well, how far have I come as a leader? So you've got your leadership knowledge, skills and understanding, but me, the leader, against a set of competencies, and how far that you, the leader, have come. You can see that the sort of the lilac-y dots, whilst there's sort of 2 per half a term there, how you balance your days for your placement score is up to you. But experience has told me that it is better to spread the days across the year, because it's really important that you're able to report in your piece of work you have to send in to be assessed, that you can show impact in across the 5 days piece of work that you've done in that placement school. So that gives you sort of a visual, and it is on a 12-month cycle. So the flexibility, which we mentioned before, people then say to me, well, that's quite structured. It is quite structured because it's really important that we're able to see the flow of the learning that opportunities that you have to undertake. What we're not able to do with this last group, in terms of going for final assessment, you will need to apply for final assessment at the end of that 12-month cycle. And we don't know at the moment how that will pan out, other than the final assessment will be paid for by the DFE and National College. Are there any questions, please, Tim?
Yes, a couple of questions. You mentioned earlier in the last slide that often we often have heads that apply for NPQH as well. If a head does apply, could they would an appropriate sponsor be the LLE or senior primary advisor?
Yes, yeah, could be, and could be the school improvement partner or school evaluation partner that you have. It would be someone in that sort of ilk that would be your sponsor.
Okay. And also, when you talk about the school placements, are these schools allocated to candidates, or do they choose their own? What's the setup there?
Basically, at induction day, and just prior to induction day, you'll get sort of like a survey monkey that says, where geographically would you want your placement? What type of schools? You might want a Roman Catholic school. The age phase, you might want Key Stage 1. So the geography, location, the phase, the type of school, and we're able then to match you to a school. Because in the old days, they used to match, that school's really dead good at phonics, go there. But actually, this is about tracking you to effective leaders of schools and academies. Now, you might say, actually, Yvonne, I know just the school I've always wanted to go to. Can we go to that one? But it's not signed up to your placement list yet. As long as they meet the good outstanding criteria and are able to commit and fill in the relevant paperwork to make sure we get the quality that we need, then there's no reason why you can't identify your own placement too. I'll preempt a question. Some people say, well, have the school, it's a waste of time. You're going to an outstanding school to help them. What if I'm in a MAT and we've got one of our schools is in RI? Can we work in those schools too? Yes, you can, but that's something we need to talk about when you've signed up for the program, and we take each individual case, because we do have to make sure that the sponsor for the placement school is different to the sponsor of your home school or academy. So any more questions there, Tim?
Yes, one question. One colleague is an acting head of a small AARP, an alternative resource provision, and it's run by a large mainstream academy. Is it okay for the head of the mainstream academy to be their sponsor?
Yes.
That's great.
That's
if a colleague asks, what about colleagues from early years private settings? Are they okay if they're a senior head of an early years private setting? Are they okay to
Yes,
are they qualified to apply for NPQH?
yes. We've had early
Great.
year practitioners, we've had from a range of different, the bottom line is that you need to show, and I'll come to that when I do the application, but you need to show that you have can illustrate the competency in strategically taking strategic lead of key areas. So as long as you can meet the criteria, then there's no reason why you can't apply to NPQH. Currently, in our group of 60 plus that started in September, we've got a barrister on the programme, which has caused a bit of consternation actually. But what that barrister had done, they'd done one day in a school for the last couple of years, have subsequently still doing a couple of days a week, but still barristing because can't afford to give up the day job just yet. And they're working on the NPQH with one of the licensees as we speak, and doing a great job in the school that they're working in. So there's always a solution. One of the things I'd say to all of you, we just need you. There's enough people for you to link with to be upfront if there's an issue or you want to talk to me or to other colleagues about online, it might be too, then just be upfront and we'll find a solution for you.
And a final question for this one. Obviously, we have now plenty of schools that are through schools. If a colleague is in secondary, a senior person in the secondary school, is the opportunity there if they wanted to go and work within a middle school or a primary school and focus on that for their
Yes,
placements? That's
yeah,
great.
we have lots of people in secondary wanting to have to have a placement in a primary, and conversely, we have lots of primary colleagues that've done some work in secondaries, and they've really found the benefits. And in terms of sort of leadership, understand that leadership is leadership. What's different is the context. So getting a feel of the context has been quite important to those colleagues. And the same for colleagues who know they're going on and want to go into a faith headship, then there is some support there to make sure that we can support you in that process as well, because some archdioceses don't let sort of you go unless you have done NPQH and have a Catholic certificate, for example. And we've been working with some diocese colleagues to make sure that the NPQH can translate into getting a Catholic headship as well. So again, these are all things we can pick out once you're on the programme, and we can just find solutions and look at best schools to place you that match your needs, really. So placement could be a Catholic placement because you want a headship in a Catholic school.
Okay, that's it, Yvonne.
Brilliant. Thanks. I'm conscious that I'm talking at you, everybody, but could you just give us a bit of a hands up to say that everything's okay and you feel that I'm not going too fast for you?
Okay, folks, if you click your hand icon, I'll be able to see who's saying what.
Everyone all right?
Yeah, it's good. We've got,
Brilliant.
yeah, well, up until 80%, yes.
Right.
And I've
Cheers.
got,
Thank you.
yeah.
So here's the critical bits now. So we've got until, or you've got till the 2nd of June, and it's midday 2nd of June. Do not miss that deadline. Your application will not be accepted after the deadline. And I've said earlier on, the application now goes direct to the licensee of your choice. The licensee will then send on all the applications they receive by that deadline to the assessment centre. The assessment centre will judge if you get through this gateway. It's called Gateway 1. Only if the judgment is it's borderline, will you have to be interviewed. So for this year only, your application is only, your sort of assessment is only by application. And your sponsor, obviously your sponsor's bit is included within that. If there is a query or it's borderline, you're likely then to either get a telephone conversation or an interview. And that will happen between the 2nd of June and the 5th of July. by the 5th of July then, or so that week, what we'll then be able to do is to geographically locate where the best places to put for the face-to-face events. So you'd need to just bear with us. So we will be able to tell you, once successful and having applied to our licensees, where the face-to-face first induction will take place, and be able to send all the dates out for the whole year of what's happening when. And obviously we start in September next academic year. Just next page, please, Tim. These are the competencies. Now, there are 16 competencies. I personally, and I've been involved with NPQH since it started, love the competency model. Because in the past, colleagues have said, well, I've just had to write a policy, or I've just got the middle leadership team to do X. But actually, in order to get the middle leaders to do something, that you've had to really drive it forward. You've had to be able to drive it forward and be really clear what the purpose is, get them on board, get them committed, and it's more than doing the job. So it's not just about what you do, it's about how you do it. And the 6 red competencies are the competencies you'll be writing to in your application. So the hardest thing really is identifying, in the last 3 years, significant whole school strategic leadership activity that you can then match to one of these competencies. So I'm just going to pause for a minute or two, and what I'd like you to do with your piece of paper and pen, if you would, and I'm only going to give you a couple of minutes, can you write down 2 or 3 significant leadership pieces of work that you've led in the last couple of years, and just jot them down, and then I will come back to them a bit later. Don't worry about the competencies for now. 3 jobs, leadership that's strategic, that's had an impact, that you've done in the last couple of years. Okay, colleagues, even if you've only got 1, that's fine for this example, but I am strongly recommending that you spend, before you do your application proper, that you write out all your strategic leadership roles that you've done in the last 3 years on a piece of paper. Create a number of columns. The first column listing all the strategic roles that you've undertaken, and then the next 6 columns put personal drive and accountability, self-awareness, self-management, delivering continuous improvement, modelling excellence in teaching, learning focus, efficient and effective at the top. So you've got 7 columns. First column, all the jobs that you've strategically led, and then a column that's down the left hand, which is Tim's just showing down the left hand, if that was a sort of your piece of paper, and then the top titles of the 6 columns will be the 6 red competency areas. And it's going to be really critical then is in unpacking which competency the piece of work you've led sits under. And I will come back to that later. So is there any questions appeared on that one, Tim?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, so I'm just going to move on then. So you'll need in your application to write to those 6 competencies. I'm just going to go through just what makes a successful application. You can read these at your leisure. I've already talked about this one. Choose your example of leading and making a difference at whole school level. Write that list out first. Consider what that job was about, how you delivered that piece of work, because that will really help you with your tick list against the 6 competencies. Because that's then the hardest bit, is selecting from your list which example you're going to write to. And you will be asked in the application to choose, in the main, although there are some exceptions, one example that you're going to write to in the question areas. I'm probably teaching to suck eggs here, colleagues, but in the past, 10% of people do not get through the written application stage. And in the main, the reasons why people don't get through the application stage is because they don't answer the question correctly, that they write too many words, because the assessor will not mark any words over 500 if it's you, any words over 200 if it's your sponsor. Some people write too many bullets, and the trouble with a bulleted list, it doesn't give the assessor an insight into the nature of the work you've been doing and the real difference it's been made. So try as much as possible to use narrative style to convey a clear response to the question. Next slide, please, Tim. I've just put there links back to the what and the how. It is when we look at the questions in a minute, really think about the best way of using your word allocation, which is demonstrating not only what you did, but how you did it and the difference that was made. You don't always have to put data, although it does say that, but there has to be an outcome. What was the outcome, and how do you know what evidence is there to show that outcome was an effective outcome for the work that you did? All right, if you're doing something in maths or assessment, it's sometimes easier to show a shift in the number of GCSEs, the number of progress levels, etc. But outcomes can be just as hard as some impact sort of data as well. Now, the closing date is the 2nd of June, which across the country, not sure about in Paris though, Jerry, across the country is half term. So you will need to complete this application or get your sponsor to complete it by the Friday, because they may be in holiday in Paris over half term. So it's really important, if you work backwards from the 28th, that you're clear with your sponsor what's expected of them, because where people have been anxious getting their application is because their blooming sponsor hasn't filled in their 200 words for each of the sections. And that, the worst thing you want at the end of term, especially this half term, is pulling your hair out because the head or the SIP or whoever it is that's acting as your sponsor hasn't completed their part of the application form. Someone asked me on Monday, can we draft some responses into there? But yes, you can, but it does need to be signed off. And it's always better to have a different way of expressing your impact and competency from a second colleague. So it's good that they make some changes in their own language and the way they're writing it as well. Where you can, provide this quantified evidence of impact, but in every question you will need to show, this is what I did, this is when I did it, because you need to put dates as well, this is how I did it, and this was the difference made. And just keep that sort of mantra in your head when you're checking against the questions. Just next slide, please, Tim. Tim, can you just move on to the next slide, please?
It is the next slide, strategic, not operational. Oh, hold on. How
No,
about
so,
that? Sorry.
right,
Pause.
it's in bold for a purpose. Please, 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 please do not go into operational. It is to take your strategic whole school stance with the piece of work. And I've already mentioned this, make sure that impact is clearly stated and not just what you do. Again, one of the second reasons for colleagues not getting through the written application is the impact isn't explicitly stated. I've mentioned this already, I would have my checklist of significant leadership activity piece of paper on my table. I'd have the application form and I'd have my competency headlines so that I could just cross-check myself as I go. Everybody works differently, but I think it's really important as a minimum to have those, and you've got your guidance documents as well, that if you're struggling then just go back to the guidance document. If you're not quite sure, go back to your competency headline. Does that really sit there? And if you're not sure again, just come away from it for a minute. Just come away from it, go and have a coffee, and then go back to say, actually, no, that doesn't sit there. So I would draft everything in Word first before I even put it into the application, because the application is electronically linked anyway. So at least you can pick and mix your examples then. And just lastly, just make sure somebody else reads your application and get them to check, look, does my response answer the question asked? And I'm sure you know lots of people that are really good at checking things like that. Just again, in your time scale to the 28th of May, when half term starts, just make sure somebody that you know knows that you'll be asking them to just have a check through on your behalf, because you won't be able to see the wood for the trees. And having filled in myself a significant number of applications that look like this for the college, it is good to have somebody to do a check-in on yourself. Because it's only by application now, the assessors will mark these as read. So don't try and be creative with your answers either. Just make sure you answer the question. Okay.
There's a few questions come in, Yvonne, I'll just field them to you. If somebody's the Senko in a school, is it too broad to use SEN as a whole across the school? Before they went to the school, there was very little in place, and they've obviously been working to put it across the whole school there.
Who gave that question? Who was it?
Somebody called Karen. Yes, Caroline.
So Caroline, in a minute, do you mind me using you as an example to answer one of the questions? Do you want to just put your hand up so that Tim can see that you're saying you're okay with that? Because the leadership activity would be being a Senko, but actually we need to probe deeper into that to decide which element of that area links to a competency. And I'm just going to preempt a question. Somebody then may say to me, well, Yvonne, could we use being a Senko twice? Because I might be undertaking a pupil premium review to close the gap. That's one element of my work. But another element may be looking at the effective implementation of the new SEN expectations. So yes, you could use a piece of work that you've led in more than one place, but only if you have to, because the examples that you give will be so different. For the two examples, you could probably get away with it, but I wouldn't do more than two examples if you are the lead senior member of staff doing a Senko role, for example. I'm sure there's lots of other examples in charge of teaching and learning, curriculum lead. There are different work you could do within that, but you'd need to really drill down what competency was I using in that particular element of work. So thanks for volunteering then. I will come back to you in a minute. Is there another question there, Tim?
Yeah, we've got several. What about if somebody's led something across a cluster group? They've had to set up school direct for 12 schools in the partnership and train people and
Fantastic. That's a piece of work. Again, same thing. You've got lots in there. And if I had time today, but I've only got sort of a good hour, I'd probably use yourself as an example as well. It's just drilling down, which are the significant competencies you think you've used in that work across in setting up School Direct. If I get time, who's asked that question?
It was Toby.
So Toby, I might come to you as well if we get time. It's another question, and I'm just going to move on.
Yeah, we've got, hold on. What about when somebody's got the situation where they've started a new school, where they've done the project in their old school? Should they do something for their new school, or can they go back to what they did in their old school?
3 years. It's 3 years. Just make sure across the 3 years that the examples are significant strategic ones. So, if you have got a piece of work that you can show impact in your new school, great. But if you only just moved schools, then use the schools that or the academies you previously worked in. Not a problem.
Great. And just one more. The definition of significant leadership activity is always difficult having definitions. How would that be described, do you think? How would you describe significant leadership activity?
I could say that I've written a policy with a group, but the significance would be the buy-in from the governors, the way in which the policy has been implemented, the difference it's made. So, there are lots of different bits of work, as we all know, that we do as leaders. The significance would be the effect it's had on standards and school improvement and children's learning. And I'm sure all of you, no matter whether you're working in early years or you're working in FE, that you will have a number of examples that are significant. And the check on yourself will be, when you've written your list, is just, you might even decide to do a red, amber, green and saying, well, that's probably not significant because there wasn't a lot of impact following that, although it went well. So you might just, your green ones are the ones that you definitely make sure go into the examples in the questions. If you're struggling then, you might think, goodness me, have I got any more green examples? Could I write down? Or go to leave the red ones till last. Don't use them unless you really need to. If you've made the decision that actually this piece of work didn't have the same level of impact in the children, on the staff, on the school, as this one did. Hopefully that's answered the question, what I think the difference with significance mean.
That's great. Thanks very much, Yvonne.
Is that one more question? Is that it? Okay, no, right, fine. So these are the application key sections, and I just want you, if you want to open up the application paperwork in front of you, like I'm doing at the moment, and I've just got the front sheet of the application, and I don't know which ones you've opened up, but the front of mine talks about Region Northwest Provider Outstanding Leaders Partnership. So because you're making your link direct to our licensees, you'll find it will come under one of the 3 licensees the best practice works with. You will send it to where, see the emailing there, by midday 2nd of June to cpd@bestpracticenet.co.uk, and that's where it will go to. Because you've put either Northwest or East Midlands or the Southeast, then when it goes for assessment, it will go back to that licensee, and the licensee will then organise the geographical manoeuvring of where's the best venue then to place the face-to-face events. In terms of the next couple of sheets and the general guidance and the application, I'm not going to go into those sort of pages 2 and 3. I'm going to go straight to section 1, your experience and performance as a senior leader. So thanks, Tim. So I'm missing it. That's all self-explanatory, just fill it in. This is the bit now where sections 1 to 7, you've got 500 words. Now, to me, when I look at that question, it's in 3 parts. Part 1 although it comes last in here, is asking me about my role, the piece of work it was, and the date. So for these two examples, because it asks you for two examples, two recent examples, so I would start off example 1, what it was, what your role was, and what the date was. Now, you've only got 500 words. I strongly recommend that you don't do 350, 400 words for one example and only 100 words for another. Try and have equal wordage for each of the two examples. So my first part is make sure it's clear what the work, leadership work was, what your role was, and what the date of this work was. And then the second part then, it talks about demonstrating your readiness for headship. So in what way did that piece of work prepare you for readiness for headship? Explain, it says here, how you demonstrated that. So talk about the key, what you did, but also how you were able to do that, the way you had to sell your vision or whatever your example you're going to give in there. And the third bit is, how do you know then you made a difference? What was the main achievement? What was the outcome? What was the impact of you doing that work? That's the three parts. Okay, so a little snip for all sections, read it through, decide how many bits to the question there are. I always take the date bit up first, you know, that's just the way I am. I'd probably do a one-liner. My role was, work it was, and the dates. It just gets that out of the way. It's amazing how many people forget to put the dates and they lose marks. So that's how I would break down a question, and then I would check that I'd go back when I've completed my 250 words on each of the two areas, and I'd just check that I've answered the question. Just a word of warning on this. Try not to, you know, when you've got your list of all your leadership work you've done in the last 3 years, just try not to choose two pieces of work that you need to use somewhere else. So really decide which elements you're going to put where, because if you put two really great pieces of work in here, you might not be able to use them again a bit later on. So just be careful what you do put in there. And some people have said to me, well, should I leave that till last? No, don't leave it till last, but just on your little grid that you're doing before you start the application, just try and be clear. So read all the questions so you know what they're asking you, so that you can actually be specific in the examples. If I go down to the sponsorship statement, I'm just going to give you the one line, you know, the assessors are going to kill me, I think. The first statement is going to be, I verify the evidence provided is relevant. You know, just use their first sentence and get your sponsor, or you put that in for every box for the sponsor. What you then, if you've run out of words, or sort of you could have written another 50 words above, then you may want them to reinforce how well you did do the job or the piece of work, and how it linked to the competency. So the sponsor's words are reinforcing things you've said or extending them, and where possible, if there's another example that you've got on your tick list that you haven't been able to use, get them to talk about that as well. Okay, so, and obviously this quantified evidence where they can, you know, their one-liner at the bottom, you know, the impact of this has been, data shows that my school improvement plan priorities were set because of the work that Yvonne did in this area. So again, you know, just using your words effectively will help you, but also gives a bit of a structure to the sponsor. So what I'm saying about all the sponsor sections, get the sponsor to verify straight away, and then get the sponsor to extend and add additional information reinforcing what you've said, if that's needed, and also if there's sufficient words, get them to write an additional example, potentially, but don't lose track. Make sure they do talk about impact. The impact of Yvonne's work has been that the school improvement priorities have been revised and includes this element of work. Data has shown a significant increase in. Governors have included in their report to full board X, Y, and Z. So again, that would be okay too.
Yvonne,
could you just give me a call of hands? That's a question there.
Yeah, a couple of questions there. A couple are to do with, obviously, quantitative data is great, but what about if it's more qualitative, the data? Is that relevant?
I think first-hand evidence is always relevant. It's just the way you put it across. So depending on what you've done, if it's linked to some pastoral work and young people are more, just the way, it's cited in the pastoral meeting or cited in the curriculum meeting that young people had, that's still an evidence base. You won't probably be able to cite data for every single example you give, but try and, where possible, have quantitative data, but really tighten your qualitative data so that it's clear what the difference was. But you obviously, it's first-hand evidence. Well, I'm just trying to think of an example. Staff meetings agenda, or the outcomes of staff meeting has shown that staff do feel more at ease in the way in which they're applying the behaviour policy. Okay, so the staff meeting note is sufficient evidence. But don't always do that for every question. Only do that as if the example is so good for the competency, but the output is a qualitative one. But just be tight on your qualitative response.
So where you've taken a school from inadequate to good, or where you've had lots of inspectors' feedback, so those elements that could be used as well.
Yeah, and you'd quote Ofsted, but just be careful on the number of words you use. So the most, cut your words. So recent Ofsted shows. Comments from Ofsted indicate that my leadership was wonderful of this, and that showed how resilient or future focused I was. Just keep that tight. But that's fine. Another quick question.
And do you attach evidence with the application, or is this what the sponsor is verifying?
No, it's the verification from the sponsor.
That's great. Okay, that's fine. Just to say, colleagues, I just say colleagues who have got other questions that are quite specific, we'll be picking those up. The admin staff at Best Practice will pick those up and answer your questions specifically. And I know there's an email address that Yvonne will give where you can ask her specific questions. Okay, Yvonne?
And we are going to, because of sort of this is always a tight hour, I hope you have got a bit flexible on the 8 o'clock, because I just want to know, Tim, can we just go to the list, Caroline? With the list? Can we just come off the form for a minute? Right, Caroline, can I just talk to you? Can Caroline be unmuted for a sec?
Okay, Carol, I'm about to unmute you. Okay, so beware of any barking dogs or anything.
Right, and can everybody else have open the competency headlines and just see where you think we get to in terms of. So can I just explain what you wrote down in your piece of paper, the leadership sort of strategic activity?
Okay, Caroline, are you there?
No.
I don't think the microphone's working.
Is Toby there? Can Toby be unmuted?
Hold on. Okay, Toby, I'm about to unmute you. Okay, Toby, are you there?
Yeah.
Hi, Toby. Okay. Great. Sorry, your second choice, mate, but you've got in there. You're all right.
Very good.
You're all right. I feel as if I know you. Do I know you?
I'm not sure. Yeah, Black Furs.
All right. Yeah, I think I might know you actually. Anyway, that's an aside. Can you just tell me a piece of work you wrote down? You know, the leadership piece of work that you wrote down on a bit of paper.
Yeah, I've set up a school direct partnership for Staff University with their Seed Congleton Partnership for 12 primary schools.
Right. I'm going to pause you. I've set up. What does that mean?
So I set up all the UCAS forms for the university, wrote all the forms for the guidelines of what students need to have to get on the course.
Right, I'm going to stop you because at the moment you're talking, and thanks for doing this with me operationally, because when we do things, we make it sound really easy. Now, in order to get all the UCAS stuff together, because I work for the DFE, I didn't tell people that a couple of days a week, so I know all about School Direct. Have you had to scope all the potential trainees in terms of who's eligible and who you're trying to target to get onto the School Direct process?
Yes, we've done all that. I've took part in the interview panels and things like that as well.
So what's the key element of that work? What have you been doing, do you think, in terms of, have you had to get commitments from the placement schools that you use for your trainees?
Yeah, I've had to with all 12 primary schools in the Congleton cluster, yeah.
There's not many then, have you, Toby? You know, so you've got commitment from all 12 schools. In order to get into commitment from 12 different head teachers in different types of schools, what have you had to do? Because everybody says School Direct. What the hell's that? So what have you had to do?
Well, we've had meetings with myself and the university, as well as with the head teachers, and then tomorrow we've got a meeting with the mentors where the university and myself are talking to the 12 mentors from the different schools about what students are going into their schools in September.
So is this, have you had to have personal drive? I'm just trying to direct you because you're just telling me what you're doing. In terms of the personal drive, have you had to sell the benefits of School Direct and how that is going to make the best teachers since sliced bread? Just yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Have you had to really take responsibility to be self-motivated and to really get others motivated so that they actually do really look at the quality of provision, that they do make sure they've got a mentor in school? Have you had to do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds better that way, doesn't it? So
yeah.
So which competency? Because my thinking at the moment is that, like, if you talk to me in the way I've just been, does this person demonstrate a real desire to? Has School Direct been a challenge? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Major one.
Is the purpose to achieve excellence for teaching and learning, or is it to achieve excellence for the school as a whole? Because it could come under learning focus, passion for improving. Hours. Sorry about that, to me. Passion for improving learning. Right.
Yeah.
Is that the quality of training? So your example, in my view, depending on how much I prodded you, could fit in either learning focus or personal drive and accountability. Now, have you been in charge of the money?
Me and the business manager part of the school, yeah. So we're setting down.
Yeah, sorry, say that again.
Yes, we are negotiating with the schools for the money. Yes.
And have you been liaising with the HEIs on the numbers required and how you're getting everybody to the right place at the right time with the right people?
Yes, I've done all that, yeah.
Right, so you could actually, depending on which angle you wanted to take this piece of work, you could put that under operational management, efficient and effective. You could sit that under teaching. I hope everybody can sit, and you could actually sit it under personal drive and accountability. But just by the questions I've asked, when I was asking you questions about finance and getting the right people at the right places, that led it more towards operational management. When I was talking about commitment, getting drive, really getting all those schools on board, that was bringing it to personal drive and accountability. And then when I was talking about, look, was this about getting the best teacher since sliced bread? Is it critical to success to make sure that the interviews, the monitoring was really in place? That would take it under learning focus. Can you just give us some hands there, everybody? See if that was making sense, because I'm doing that really quickly. Can people see what I'm trying to do? Yeah? Is that helpful? Yeah, so I suppose thanks ever so much, Toby, because it's really hard sort of just when I can't see your eyes or see you. But it's too easy for us to go up. So when you've got, right, I've been leading School Direct, or I've been leading SEN, or I've been leading the pastoral teams, or I've been leading the curriculum, the curriculum development, I've been leading the policy on behaviour. Just unpack it and challenge yourself, like which elements does it sit more comfortably with? Because of the way you were telling it, Toby, I think it would probably sit more comfortably for me to put my tick under efficient and effective. But I think you just need to make that decision yourself, because I think I could fit in one of the three. And interestingly, that example, you see the red ones, everybody, 5, 6 and 7. Colleagues find the red ones more difficult to complete. So that School Direct one is a really interesting one, because you could sit that in any of the 3 areas, depending on how you wrote it down, the elements that you've been doing. And you said we twice. Don't use the word we. It's I led. I led identifying the vision and the focus and the rationale behind why School Direct was important for getting the best teachers in our schools locally. We wanted, I wanted to make sure with the senior leadership team to ensure that there was succession embedded locally across our schools. You got the idea, everybody? I'm going to shut up on that now, because it's just over time. So just to summarise, all the questions now, questions 1, so sections 1 to 7, all have top question and a section for the sponsor. Make sure that you break the question down. Where it says an, it means one. So questions, the self-awareness and self-management is still asking for one example. And just the final thing on the application, what it then asks you for is 2 aspects of your leadership that you consider you need to develop further. Everybody's going to write this. A lot of people write financial management as an area that they want to get more familiar with. Don't be tempted to write you need to extend your strategic understanding of school leadership, because the whole of this application is about being strategic. So if you say that's a weak area, it won't go down very well with the assessors. You know, just think of something. It might be that you've got to, one of the areas is something about your emotional you, that you've got to just keep that in the back door when you're dealing with scenarios where you need to be objective. You know, there's lots of things that would make us even better leaders, and that's the time to sort of to write a couple of things. So again, that question, section 2 is still in 3 parts, but it does ask you for an example, one example. Sorry, it doesn't ask you for one example. It asks you to focus on where have you been self-aware, where have you shown self-management, how have you prepared yourself for headship, and then ask you for 2 examples, 2 aspects of where you need to develop further. All the other areas, so sections 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1 example, usually 3 aspects to the question, and the same sort of format for your sponsor. Is there any questions that look really important that everybody needs to have an answer to there, Tim?
Really, Tim, a lot of the questions are fairly specific. I would say, colleagues, that we will get round to those questions. Either you can email Yvonne directly, or our VPN admin team will pick them up when they look through the transcript of tonight.
Okay, and my promise to your colleagues, if anyone bothers to email me with if you're really struggling on a question, just email me. just to say, you know, tomorrow night, Tuesday night, I've got Division 2 Cheshire Tennis, so I won't get back to you tomorrow night, but if you come back to me, but I will get back to you before the sort of, by the next day. Just if we just finish off then, Tim, please, just go on to the next slide, please. So, you know, this is just basically saying, you know, depending on what comes out early July of how many have got through the assessment, we will set up central venues according to geographical location of colleagues being successful coming on the programme. Jerry, I'm not sure your situation, but you might want to email me after you've got through and we can talk about the best way to support you if you're actually working in Paris. I'm not sure whether you're on holiday or you're working there currently. But we'll run groups in a range of locations depending on how many come through in July and what their geographical locations are. And just move on, please, Tim. Next slide, Tim.
Yeah.
These are the course fees. It's really important that your heads, or if you are the acting head, you know what the cost is. Now, if you are in Cheshire, Warrington, in the Northwest, the first 90 applicants coming through OLP, because OLP is has been very successful, there's some surplus money from the licence called OLP. £500 is going to go off that 2250. So that will be, in OLP only, will be £500 cheaper because of the way OLP puts any surplus, because it's a bigger licensee, goes to offset the costs. So it will be cheaper if you're in the Northwest, but again, if you feel like travelling up to the Northwest for face-to-face events, then first 90 people will get that £500 cheaper. Just the next one, please, Tim. Again, they're just some stats. It's higher than 55 now achieved headship. You know, I feel like I don't want to be a salesperson. You know, my bottom line, colleagues, is if you apply, you get through the application stage, and you're with one of our licensees, we'll look after you. We'll make sure that your leadership is developed, and you know, either getting your headship and getting NPQH as a qualification. We'll support you with a number of colleagues through that to make sure you get the best programme and process. And I think that's verified with all the evaluations and everything we do. And Tim would do the same with the online, because Tim heads up the online modular study. And just lastly, I think, is there another one there?
Just one question before we go. Sorry.
Yeah.
One of the questions, and several have just come up with it, in terms of examples for the different sections. Is it best to have a different example for every section, or can you use the same one for a couple? What would be your advice around that?
I think it goes to the example with Toby there again. Like, by the way I questioned him, there were two, maybe three areas I could have put his piece of work. But it's the way then you're describing his piece of work. You wouldn't be talking just about school direct. You know, you'd be talking about gaining commitment from 14 schools, and you're having to get them to understand the value of school direct in one of them. In another element, you'll be talking about the way you've had to process, looked at costs, be able to sort out venues in order to get the right quality, so that strategically the trainees have the best possible opportunities to develop as trainees. And in the quality assurance application of the system, that you knew how well that would come in the one operational, the efficient and effective element. So how do you describe that bit? A bit of the work would take it into one of the sections. I said earlier on, I would not use School Direct as an example, even though I'm actually illustrating different elements of the work I've done in School Direct. I wouldn't use School Direct for every area. I maybe use it twice. If you can't even use it twice, I would only use it once. So where you can, have a different example. If you're struggling, then fine, use it twice, but really drill down the different elements of School Direct that links with the section area. My email address is there if you need to come back to me after today, because I knew we were going to go to 8:15. And so I'm sorry, colleagues, if you're starving, or you've got something to watch on the telly, or you've got loads of work to do. But it's just been really important I try and draw that out for you, so that at least you can put it into practice when you start your application tomorrow or whenever you can start it. So unless there's anything else that's a big question that you think everybody, all 40 odd of you, would benefit from, Tim?
No, there's nothing specific that we could deal with.
Can I just say to everybody, thank you so much for giving up your time tonight. I really hope that you make an application. Good luck with your application. Looking forward to working with you, with one of the licensees. Enjoy. We want you as heads in our schools. So I'm looking forward to working with you next year. Take care of yourselves. Have a great evening, and get in touch if you need to. If all 40 of you get in touch with me tonight, I'm going to not get home though. I'm not going to do any. I'm not going to get to bed tonight. So if you can just span it out, if there are any questions, I'd be grateful. Take care of yourselves. Tim, thank you for your input too. Thanks everybody. Take care.
Okay.